wind howled across the endless Texas plains, slamming against the rickety windows of the Dusty Spur diner. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee mingled with rain-soaked air as thunder rolled like a restless drum across the sky. Emma Caldwell, her sleeves rolled to the elbows and her apron stained with the day's work, moved between tables with the quiet rhythm of someone too used to struggle. Her small-town life had been reduced to long shifts and quiet sighs, ever since her father's ranch was sold off piece by piece to pay debts that weren't hers. The diner bell jingled. Every head turned as a man stepped in from the storm. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with rain dripping from his hat brim. His jeans were dusty, boots worn, jacket scuffed. He looked every inch the drifter cowboy people whispered about on lonely highways. He carried the air of someone who'd ridden farther than he cared to count and talked less than he felt. "Coffee," he said in a low, gravelly voice shaking off rain. Emma gave him a nod, pouring the steaming liquid into a chipped mug. "Rough weather for a ride," she said lightly, searching for a hint of warmth in his eyes. He only grunted. "Seen worse." She smiled faintly and walked away. But something about the man lingered, something in the way he sat facing the window, his gaze fixed on the storm like he'd seen too many of them, both outside and in. The locals watched him, whispering theories. "Probably one of those broke ranch hands," a trucker muttered. "Looks like he's run out of road." Emma hated small-town gossip. She knew what it was like to be judged without a chance to speak. She refilled his cup without asking, ignoring the murmurs. Minutes later, a shout broke through the hum of rain. A young boy, no older than 10, sprinted across the flooded street, chasing his runaway dog, just as a pickup truck came barreling through the intersection. Time froze. Before Emma could scream, the cowboy shot from his seat like lightning. His chair clattered to the floor as he burst through the diner door, boots splashing through the water. The truck's horn blared, tires screeched, but the man reached the boy first, grabbing him by the collar and spinning him out of the road just in time. The truck swerved, fishtailed, and missed them by inches before roaring past into the rain. Emma's heart hammered as she rushed out, kneeling beside the boy. The cowboy stood there, soaked to the bone, chest heaving, rain sliding down his face like tears he'd never let fall. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice calm but trembling beneath the surface. The boy nodded, wide-eyed. Emma looked up at the stranger, breathless. You saved his life." He tipped his hat slightly. "Just did what anyone should have." But she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or a memory too heavy to name. He turned away, muttering, "Keep the coffee warm," before walking back into the diner like nothing had happened. Inside, whispers spread again, but this time, they weren't about judgment. They were about wonder. Who was he? Emma watched him sit back down, dripping rain onto the floor, staring at his untouched plate like a man haunted by ghosts only he could see. And as thunder rolled over the plains again, she knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just another drifter passing through. Something about him was running from something bigger, and by tomorrow, she'd find out exactly what. The storm died by morning, leaving the air heavy and washed clean, the sun a pale disk rising over the horizon. The Dusty Spur diner smelled of biscuits and bacon, and Emma was already on her second pot of coffee when she saw him again. The cowboy sat alone at his corner booth, hat low, a folded map on the table beside an untouched plate of eggs. He hadn't said a word since sunrise. She approached quietly. "You planning to sit there till next storm rolls in?" She teased gently, trying to draw a smile. He didn't look up. "Just waiting on the sun to dry the roads." Emma leaned on the counter, curious. Most folks who come through here are either running toward something or away from it. That made him look up. His eyes were gray, like smoke that never clears. "Guess I'm doing a bit of both." She smiled, though something about his tone sent a chill through her. "Well, either way, you make quite an entrance. Folks around here can't stop talking about how you saved that boy." He shifted uncomfortably. Wasn't nothing, but to Emma, it was everything. In that one act, she'd seen something she hadn't in years. A kind of quiet courage that wasn't about showing off, but about doing the right thing when no one else would. "What's your name?" she asked finally. He hesitated. "Luke," he said after a pause, as if dusting off a word he hadn't used in a long time. Luke Ryder. The name didn't ring a bell, but the way he said it felt heavy, like it carried too much history. She nodded. "I'm Emma, and you're welcome here, Luke, storm or no storm." He gave her the faintest nod before turning back to his map. She caught a glimpse before he folded it shut. Land parcels, ranch markings, initials scrawled in faded ink. There was one name circled over and over again: Caldwell Ranch. Her heart skipped. That was her father's land, the one they lost years ago. "Why are you looking at that place?" she asked softly. Luke froze, realizing she'd seen. "Just business." "Business?" Her tone sharpened. "That land's been empty since the bank took it. You know something about it?" He looked at her, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in his expression. Regret, sorrow, guilt. Then he folded the map, stood, and dropped a few bills on the counter. "You take care now, Miss Emma." Before she could press him, he was gone, out the door, into the bright morning, disappearing down the dusty road. Emma stood there, heart pounding. What kind of business did a drifter have with land nobody wanted? And how did he even know the Caldwell name? That night, unable to sleep, she sat by her window, staring out at the moonlit road that led past the old ranch. She remembered her father's voice the day they lost it. "Not all men who ride in with charm and promises mean you well, Em. Some own more than they'll ever deserve." Maybe Luke was one of those men. Or maybe he was running from the kind of wealth that ruins a soul. Either way, she had to know the truth. And when she saw headlights in the distance, heading not toward town, but toward her family's abandoned ranch, Emma grabbed her jacket, heart racing, and followed. The dirt road wound like a scar through the empty land, its edges glowing silver under the moonlight. Emma's truck bounced over the ruts as she followed the lone beam of headlights ahead. The closer she got to the old Caldwell Ranch, the tighter her chest felt. That land had been her childhood, her father's pride, and her mother's last memory before she passed. To see someone, especially that mysterious cowboy, headed there in the dead of night made her blood run cold. She parked at the fence line and slipped out quietly, boots sinking into the soft earth. The moon lit up the broken sign. Caldwell Ranch, established 1973. Its paint peeling, its letters half swallowed by weeds. Beyond it, she saw Luke Ryder. He stood by the barn, holding a lantern that threw golden light across the crumbling wood. His hat was off, and for the first time his face looked unguarded, sad, like a man facing ghosts he'd never laid to rest. Emma stepped closer, gravel crunching under her boot. "You got a strange way of doing business, Mr. Ryder." He turned slowly, the light catching the lines on his face. "You shouldn't be here." I could say the same. She crossed her arms. "Now tell me, why are you standing on land that doesn't belong to you?" He exhaled, long and tired. "Because once it did." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Luke looked at the barn again. "This ranch used to be part of the Ryder Holdings. My father owned half this county. He built empires on cattle, oil, and other men's debts." He paused, voice darkening. "And when your father's ranch went under, it was because of him." The truth hit like thunder. "Your father?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, Henry Ryder. He took this place piece by piece. I tried to stop him, but I was young and his name was Law." His eyes glimmered with remorse. "So, when he died, I sold most of what he owned. Didn't want any of it. But this ranch..." He trailed off, voice cracking faintly. "This one I couldn't let go. Not because it was worth money. Because it was the only thing he ever took that shouldn't have been his." Emma stared at him, torn between fury and disbelief. "So you own this land now, after everything it cost my family?" "I never touched it," Luke said softly. "Left it to rot, the way guilt eats through a man's heart. I came tonight to say goodbye, to sell it off for good. Maybe to make it right." Her eyes burned. "Make it right? My father died with this land taken from him. My mother cried herself to sleep every night for years. You think you can fix that with a check?" Luke didn't move. "No, but maybe with truth." The words hung heavy in the air. The wind whispered through the empty pasture, carrying the scent of rain and old memories. Emma looked away, jaw trembling. "You had everything. All that money, all that land. What happened to you, Luke? Why are you living like some drifter now?" He chuckled dryly, no humor in it. "Because money's a curse when it comes soaked in other people's tears. I walked away from it all. Haven't looked back in years." Silence fell again, the kind that makes your heart ache. For the first time, she saw the man not as a stranger or thief, but as someone broken in ways she could almost understand. Still, the anger wouldn't leave. You should have left my family out of your past, he nodded. You're right. He stepped back, eyes soft. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It finds you when the rain hits and reminds you what kind of man you were. Emma wanted to leave, but something about the way he said it stopped her. There was pain behind every word, real, raw, human pain. Then Luke looked up at her, eyes dark and honest. There's something else you need to know, Emma. Something about your father and what really happened the day he lost this ranch. Her pulse quickened. What do you mean? But Luke didn't answer. Instead, headlights appeared in the distance, bright, fast, and coming straight toward them. He stiffened. Get down, he barked. Emma barely had time to react before the first shot cracked through the night. The echo of the gunshot tore through the quiet plains like lightning splitting the night. Emma dropped to the ground instinctively, heart hammering against the dirt. The lantern by the barn exploded in a spray of glass and firelight as another bullet whistled past her ear. Luke yanked her behind a rusted tractor, his grip firm but shaking with urgency. Stay down, he hissed. She gasped, trying to steady her breathing. Who is that? Luke peeked over the metal, eyes narrowing toward the road. Someone who doesn't want the past dug up. The headlights drew closer, slicing through the darkness, until a black pickup skidded to a stop a few yards away. 3 men stepped out, silhouettes outlined by the harsh beam. Their boots crunched on gravel. Emma could hear one of them laugh, a cold, cruel sound that made her blood run cold. Luke Ryder. The voice shouted. You should have stayed gone, boy. Emma's stomach turned. They know you, she whispered. Yeah, Luke muttered grimly. And they're not here for conversation. Another shot rang out, shattering the tractor's mirror. Emma flinched. Luke pulled a revolver from his coat, his movements calm but deliberate. You have a gun? She whispered, horrified. Old habits, he replied softly. Don't move. He fired once, a warning shot into the air. The sound thundered across the open field. The men ducked for cover behind the truck, shouting curses. Who are they? Emma demanded. Ryder men, Luke said through gritted teeth. My father's former enforcers. They stayed behind after I sold everything. Guess they didn't take kindly to me cleaning up his mess. Emma's voice trembled. They're trying to kill you? He turned to her, eyes blazing. No, they're trying to make sure you don't learn the truth. Her heart stopped. What truth? But before he could answer, another bullet struck the tractor's side, sending a shower of sparks. Luke cursed under his breath and grabbed her hand. Come on! They sprinted through the tall grass toward the barn, ducking behind broken fences and rusted machinery. The moon lit their path in flickers through torn clouds. Emma stumbled once, and Luke caught her mid-fall, pulling her close, his arm strong around her waist. For a heartbeat, the world went silent except for their breathing and the pounding of rain starting to fall again. Why are you risking your life for me? She whispered, voice trembling. He looked at her, rain running down his face. Because your father saved mine once, and I never got the chance to repay him. She froze, stunned. My father saved you? But before he could explain, headlights flared again, this time from behind the barn. They were surrounded. Luke's jaw tightened. Stay here, he said, stepping forward into the rain, revolver at his side. Emma grabbed his arm. Don't! You'll get yourself killed! He smiled faintly, something both sad and fierce in his eyes. Maybe it's time I stop running. He stepped into the open. Thunder rumbled above as the men closed in. Their leader, a heavy-set man with a scar down his cheek, laughed through the rain. Well, if it ain't the prodigal son. You think you can undo what your daddy built, Ryder? You think you can just erase Henry's name? Luke didn't flinch. I think it's long past time someone did. The man raised his gun. You should have stayed in the saddle, cowboy. Before he could pull the trigger, Luke fired. The shot struck the man's shoulder, sending him stumbling back with a roar. The others scattered, shouting over the storm. Emma covered her ears, terrified as gunfire cracked again and again, echoing through the valley. When the smoke cleared, only 2 men remained conscious. The others fled into the darkness. Luke stood motionless, his revolver still smoking, his chest rising and falling fast. Emma ran to him. Luke, you're bleeding! He looked down at the red spreading across his shirt and smiled weakly. Just a graze, but she saw the pain behind that smile. He was hurt worse than he admitted. As she tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it to his wound, she demanded, You said my father saved your life. Tell me what you meant, Luke's voice broke. Your father found me after my dad's men left me for dead. I was young, stupid, and angry. He patched me up, gave me work, treated me like I was worth something. When Henry found out, he took it out on him, called in his debts, crushed the ranch, ruined everything. He did it because of me. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. My family lost everything because your father wanted to punish you? He nodded, eyes glistening. That's why I came back. Not to steal your land again, to give it back. The rain poured harder, soaking them both. The barn flickering with the last dying light of the lantern. And as she looked into his eyes, torn between fury and compassion, Emma realized something terrifying. She no longer knew whether to hate him or to save him. The night bled slowly into dawn, gray light spilling across the wrecked ranch. Smoke still drifted from the shattered lantern by the barn door. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet soil and gunpowder. Emma sat beside Luke in the barn's shadow, pressing a rag against his wound. He winced but didn't complain. You're losing too much blood, she murmured. I've lost worse, he said, voice rough, the hint of a smile trying to ease her worry. She looked at him then, really looked. The dirt on his face, the scar running along his jaw, the way exhaustion had settled into his bones. This wasn't just a drifter. This was a man who'd been running from ghosts for too long. And tonight, those ghosts had caught up. He noticed her staring. You still think I'm just another cowboy blowing through town? Emma gave a tired laugh. You saved my life, Luke. That complicates things. He leaned back against the wall, rain still dripping through the broken roof. I wasn't supposed to come back here, he said quietly. But when I found your father's old deed among my father's papers, something in me broke. Henry Ryder took too much from too many. And I thought maybe, just maybe, I could fix one thing before I go. Her brow furrowed. Before you go where? Luke hesitated, eyes distant. I got a diagnosis last fall. Something in my lungs. Doctors said it's the dust and the years of riding. Said I've got about a year if I'm lucky. Emma's heart froze. You're dying? He nodded once calmly. Guess you could say I finally ran out of road. The words hit her like a kick to the chest. All the anger she'd been holding on to cracked, replaced by something softer, sadder. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that wasn't fair, not after everything. But instead she whispered, Then why risk your life tonight? Why not just disappear? He looked at her, and for the first time his eyes weren't guarded. They were vulnerable. Because I couldn't die knowing I still owed your father. Because he was the only good man I ever met. And because he believed there was good left in me. The silence that followed was deep enough to make the world disappear. Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight. He used to talk about you, you know. Said there was a boy once who helped mend fences after a storm. Said he'd never seen someone so stubborn to make things right. Luke's lips parted slightly. He said that? She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. He said if the world hadn't been so cruel, that boy might have become a good man. Luke turned away, his jaw trembling. He gave me a chance to be one. I failed him. No, she said softly. You didn't. You came back. He met her gaze again, something raw burning behind his tired expression. I came back because I couldn't live another day carrying what my father did. But those men tonight, they're not done. They want this land, not for the soil, but for what's beneath it. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Luke motioned toward the old well behind the barn. Your father once told me there was oil here, shallow, clean, untouched. He never drilled it, said the land was worth more than what it could give him. But Henry found out. That's why he took it. Emma blinked, stunned. Oil here? All this time? He nodded. Yeah, your father's silence kept this place peaceful. But mine saw only dollar signs. And those men tonight, they're the last of his old partners. They'll be back for what's buried under your name. The realization hit her like lightning. The land she'd thought worthless was the very reason her family was destroyed. Her voice shook. Then we have to stop them. Luke's gaze softened, almost sad. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't just land. It's a legacy. And it should have always been yours. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. An official deed, sealed and notarized. I signed it over, he said. Caldwell Ranch belongs to you again? Emma stared at it, her hands trembling. Luke, I can't take this. Yes, you can, he said, a weak smile touching his lips. Your father once gave me a second chance. I figure it's time I give you one too. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Why are you doing this for me?" He looked at her, the faint light of dawn catching in his eyes. "Because you remind me of everything I could have been, if I'd had the courage to stay." Before she could respond, a low rumble echoed from down the hill. Engines. More of them. Emma's breath caught. "They're coming back." Luke pushed himself to his feet, pain flashing through his body. "Then we finish this, once and for all." The morning light spilled across the ranch, painting the wet fields gold, a fragile calm before the storm. And as Luke loaded his revolver and Emma stood beside him, defiance in her eyes, both of them knew one truth. This land had already cost too many lives, but they weren't giving it up again. The first rays of dawn stretched over the plains like fire on cold steel, painting the sky in hues of amber and gray. The storm had passed, but another was on its way, one made of men, greed, and gunfire. Luke stood at the edge of the old porch, revolver heavy in his hand, staring toward the hill where dust clouds rose. Trucks. At least 3 of them. The rider men were coming back, and this time they weren't leaving without what they came for. Emma stood beside him, clutching her father's old shotgun. Her hands trembled, but her eyes burned with something fierce. "How many?" she asked. Luke squinted into the glare. "Too many. Then we don't have time to run," she said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. He turned to her. "Emma, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she said, jaw set. "You said my father died because of this land. I'm not letting anyone take it again." Luke almost smiled, half in pride, half in heartbreak. "You sound just like him." They moved quickly. Luke showed her how to load the shotgun properly, how to aim steady, how to breathe through fear. She listened, every nerve sharp, the weight of the moment pressing down like the humid air. Inside the barn they positioned themselves, Luke by the door, Emma by the hay bales near the back. The sun rose higher, washing the fields in harsh light. For a brief moment it was quiet again. Too quiet. Then came the engines. The crunch of gravel. The men stepped out, armed and sure of victory. Their leader, the scarred man from the night before, called out, "You got guts, Ryder! But that land ain't yours to play hero over." Luke's voice echoed steady from the barn. "It was never yours to steal," the man laughed, cruel and sharp. "You think you can stop me?" "You're just one man, one dying man." Emma's heart clenched. He knew. Somehow he knew about Luke's illness. Luke stepped forward, revolver raised, eyes cold as steel. "Maybe, but sometimes one man's enough." The gunfire started like a storm breaking. Bullets tore through the wood walls, splinters flying. Emma ducked, heart pounding, returning fire through the window. The shotgun's roar echoed across the field. Luke moved with a strange grace, the kind born from years of survival. Quick, deliberate, relentless. Each shot he fired found its mark, driving the attackers back toward their trucks. But there were too many. A bullet struck the lantern shelf, setting the corner of the barn ablaze. Flames climbed the old beams fast, crackling through the dry wood. Smoke filled the air. "Luke!" Emma coughed, waving through the haze. "We have to get out." He turned, face lit by firelight. "Not yet." He reloaded, then fired one last time. The scarred man stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, but still, he grinned through the blood. "You'll burn for this, Ryder." He spat, limping toward the truck. "You and that girl." Luke aimed again, but his revolver clicked empty. Before he could move, a shot rang out, not his. The man froze mid-step, shock spreading across his face before he collapsed into the dirt. Emma stood there, shotgun still smoking, tears streaking through soot. "No one else dies for this land," she whispered. The remaining men fled, engines roaring as they tore down the hill and vanished into the rising sun. Luke exhaled, relief and exhaustion washing over him. "You did it, Emma, you—" He staggered, clutching his side. She rushed to him, panic rising. "Luke!" He collapsed to his knees, blood blooming dark against his shirt. "Guess they got lucky after all," he said weakly, forcing a grin. She shook her head, tears spilling. "No, you're not doing this, not now." "Stay with me, Luke." He tried to stand, but his strength faltered. The fire crept closer, heat burning their skin. She grabbed him under the arms, dragging him toward the open air, every muscle screaming with effort. Outside, the sun had climbed fully above the horizon, lighting the field in gold. Emma dropped beside him in the grass, his head resting in her lap. "You're safe now," she whispered, trembling. "It's over." He looked up at her, eyes glassy but peaceful. No, it's just beginning. You've got a future now, Emma. That land, it's yours. Don't let it turn you bitter like it did my father. She shook her head, sobbing. Don't talk like that. We'll get you to a doctor. He smiled faintly. Doctors can't fix what's already gone. His hand found hers, warm and shaking. Promise me, you'll build something here. Something good, I promise, she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. But you'll be here too. You have to be. He closed his eyes, the light flickering across his face. Wish I could. And for a moment, Emma thought he was gone. But then his lips moved, one last breath escaping in a whisper. Tell your father. I finally came home. The fire hissed behind them as the wind shifted, carrying the smoke away across the fields. The land was silent again, haunted, but free. Emma bent over him, tears falling onto the soil, the same earth their families had fought and bled for. The man she thought was a drifter had given everything to return what was never his, and in doing so, he had given her back not just the land, but her hope. She looked toward the sunrise, jaw trembling, her father's ranch shining beneath it. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end, because Luke Ryder's story wasn't done yet. The sun had climbed high over the horizon by the time the fire at Caldwell Ranch died out. The barn was nothing but charred wood and smoke, curling upward into a quiet, endless sky. Emma sat in the grass, her dress torn and streaked with soot, Luke's hat resting in her lap. The land was still, eerily still, as if the earth itself was mourning. The sheriff arrived just before noon, summoned by the smoke and the sound of distant gunfire. He was an older man, the kind who'd seen too many stories like this and never quite knew what to do with the endings. He looked at Emma, then at Luke's still body lying beneath her father's old oak tree, where she'd carried him after the fire. Emma, the sheriff said softly, removing his hat. I'm real sorry. Folks in town told me what happened. She didn't look up. He wasn't who they thought he was. The sheriff nodded, stepping closer. No, ma'am, I reckon not. I knew his father, Henry Ryder, hard man, ruthless. But the boy, Luke, was different. Always was. Emma brushed a hand over the brim of Luke's hat. He tried to fix what his father broke. The sheriff sighed. And that's a rare thing these days. He gave her a moment, then said gently, You'll need to come by the office. There'll be questions about the shooting, about the property. She looked up, her eyes red but steady. The property's mine now. He hesitated. You sure about that? She reached into her coat pocket and handed him the folded deed Luke had given her, stained with ash and blood. He signed it over, said it was time the land went back to the right name. The sheriff studied it, then gave a slow, respectful nod. Then I guess it's settled. When he left, Emma stayed by the oak a while longer. The sky was a clear blue, not a cloud in sight, the kind of morning that felt almost cruel in its beauty. She whispered into the quiet. You did it, Luke. You made it right. For weeks, the ranch lay silent except for the wind and the hum of distant cattle. Word spread fast across town about the shootout, about the oil hidden beneath the land, about the drifter cowboy who wasn't just a drifter after all. Some called him a fool for giving it all away. Others called him a hero. But Emma called him something else entirely. The man who kept his promise. One evening, as the sky turned pink and the cicadas began their low song, she walked down to the barn ruins. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. She knelt beside a small wooden marker she'd placed beneath the oak, his name carved simply into it. Luke Ryder. He gave back what never should have been taken. She set his old hat on the post and smiled faintly. You said you ran out of road, she whispered, but you were wrong. You just found your way home. A warm wind brushed her face, gentle as a hand through her hair. And for the first time in years, Emma felt something lift inside her. The weight of bitterness, of loss, of everything that had been stolen. The land was hers again, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace. In the months that followed, she rebuilt. Not just fences and walls, but hope. She planted again, brought in horses, fixed the porch, repainted the sign, Caldwell Ranch, restored by the same woman who once thought it was lost forever. And sometimes, when dawn broke over the fields, she'd see a lone rider's shadow in the distance, just for a second. A hat tilted low, a horse moving slow through the morning mist. She never chased it, she just smiled. Because some ghosts, she knew, weren't meant to be feared. They were meant to be remembered. The town slowly began to visit again, helping her raise barns and repair fences. The boy whose life Luke had saved at the diner brought her flowers every Sunday, and on one of those mornings, when the fields glowed gold with sunlight, she stood on her porch and whispered, "You were right, Luke. This land was always more than money. It was forgiveness." Years later, when travelers stopped by the diner and asked about the woman who ran the big ranch down the road, they'd hear the same story told in soft tones over coffee. The story of the drifter cowboy who saved a child, righted a wrong, and left behind half a state's worth of fortune for a single acre of redemption. And as long as the wind moved through the Texas plains, his story would too, carried by the whispering grass, the creak of saddle leather, and the hearts of those who believe that even the most broken souls can find their way home. Moral: sometimes the richest man in the world isn't the one who owns the land, but the one who's brave enough to give it back.